I'm going to call this meeting to order and talk really slowly so we can get to the business with the right number of counselors in the room. So calling this meeting of the Standing Committee on Policy and Strategic Priorities to order. Mr. Clerk, may we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Robertson. Councillor Louie is on leave of absence for civic business. Councillor Stevenson also on leave of absence for civic business. Councillor Deal. Councillor Jang. Councillor Reimers in the chair. Councillor Meggs. Councillor Ball. Councillor Carr. Councillor Affleck. Councillor De Genova. You have quorum, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. As chair for this meeting, I am suggesting for reports that have no speakers or presentations, we adopt the recommendations collectively in a single motion. That on this agenda would refer to items 9 and 10, animal welfare grant and contract award for supply and delivery of bulldozers. Would anyone like to pull those? Okay, which one would you like? Okay, we're on 9 and 10 right now. So the two that, okay, just to rewind here, we are at the point in the meeting where we decide what's on the agenda. There are currently no speakers or staff presentations for items 9 or 10, animal welfare grants and the contract supply award for bulldozers. Does any member wish to hold either 9 or 10? Any takers, 9 or 10? Nope, seeing none. I have Councillor Carr has moved the recommendations. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none. We have 2 staff members who will have a much better day than they might otherwise have had waiting for those items. Okay, so the following have been approved on consent. Number 9, Animal Welfare Grant 2016. And item 10, contract award for supply and delivery of bulldozers, although that would have been a fun one to debate. Okay, so we're going to consider those items with reports, with presentation speakers are held for debate, separate vote. I do, however, before we get there, want to run through a couple of things with council in the hopes that the small amount of time I take right now may save us some time down the road in this meeting. Based on some discussion yesterday and on, I guess, the public hearing on the 24th, I did want to run through a couple things. The rules for this meeting that we use are the procedure bylaw, bylaw number 9756, if anyone's trying to follow along at home with that, as well as the Vancouver Charter. Where those 2 documents are silent, we then revert to Robert's rules. As chair, I will say that I view my role as trying to get us through the business while making sure that there is procedural fairness for councillors, mayors, mayor, I guess, staff members, the members of the public that are here, and also trying to avoid a lawsuit or having to hire lawyers to sort out the process after the fact. So to that end, the rules are meant to enable, not strangle us. So I do try to work to ensure that we can keep moving here. But where necessary, I will definitely be falling back on the procedure bylaw. There are a few baseline rules I expect everyone to follow that come out of the procedure bylaw, and I'm just going to run through them now because when they do go wrong in the meeting, there tend to be a bit of tempers involved, and I thought it'd be easier to outline them now so we can do it, you know, when we're all feeling fresh at the beginning of the day. So a few things. The procedure bylaw is quite clear on who is talking when. So as chair, I will recognize the speaker, whether it's staff or council or member of the public. The only reason that that person should be interrupted is because there is either a point of order, which I will recognize before you start speaking. At that point, the speaker that was speaking will stop speaking, and the person with the point of order will speak. The chair always takes precedence, so if I am talking or Councillor Ball, should I be absent from the room, or whoever else is in the chair, you should stop talking. In terms of a point of order, as noted yesterday, a point of order must reference an actual point in the procedure bylaw. It should not take more than 1 sentence to state that point of order. I will rule on your point of order. The only reason you would respond to me is to say 4 words, which is, I challenge the chair. There is not a point where the chair and the point of order person debate. To challenge the chair is non-debatable, so should we get to that, hopefully not happy circumstance, then you will stop talking once you say you challenge the chair. I will clarify the challenge is, and then I will ask whether the meeting sustains the ruling of the chair. If 2/3 of you vote against that, then you have overruled the chair, and we will figure out how to move forward at that point. Also, if points of order are being used to obstruct the meeting, I will call a recess and hope that cooler heads prevail. For logistics purposes, I will be using the clock directly in front of me on the wall in terms of timing of the meeting. For the purposes of your speaking time, I will be using the timer that is on your screen. Quorum. Should you need to leave the chambers at any point today, I would like you to count all of the councillors and mayor, all members of council in the room. If when you get to yourself, as the last person you're counting and the number is 6, I need you not to leave the room. If you have an urgent and personal issue that would be embarrassing to rise and speak to, I would invite you to email the clerk. The clerk is good at checking email, and I will endeavor to get you out of the room to do whatever you need to do with the least amount of embarrassment for everybody. Last point, extension. I will call for a motion on the extension at the least disruptive time in the meeting and when I have enough information from staff to advise council on when we will be coming back. If it is past 12 and neither myself nor the clerk have noticed that it's past 12, which seems unlikely but possible, I would then invite you to call that procedural issue to my attention. Oh, and if you're having equipment failure, could you please email the clerk and CC me so that we can sort it out unless it's of an urgent nature and would affect the business. Okay, I think that is it. So hopefully with that, we can get down to a really excellent meeting today. So we are on item 1 on the agenda, enlivening streets and supporting business with parklets, patios, and craft carts. We have, I didn't even get to the title and other people were talking. Okay, so we are on item 1, enlivening streets and supporting business with parklets, patios, and craft carts. And we have staff member Scott Edwards, manager of Street Activities Branch, who is here to give us a presentation. Why can't I get the microphone on? Sorry about that. We're having an equipment failure already. See, all of that work did nothing. Okay, we have a microphone. You are good to go. Sorry about that.
Good morning, Chair, Mr. Mayor, members of council. It's my pleasure to be here in front of you today to bring forward some recommendations and some summary information with regard to how we are endeavoring to make our streets more active and vibrant and yet supporting business and creating the livable city that we have today. And we're hoping to move that forward even more. As the title suggests, I'm here to talk to you about parklets, patios, and craft carts and how we are in fact enlivening our streets. 3 key points. I hope you can see this on your screens. Is it on your screens? There we go. 3 key points that I do want to touch on. Establishing a new regular, if I can call it that, regular parklet program with the support of council. I have several initiatives and updates with regard to patios and some of the ideas that we have enacted, but also some that we have moving forward, as well as some ideas and goals that we have and feedback from businesses as well for patios. We also have heard from the business community and from others, stakeholders, that there's an interest for a variety of vending opportunities on street, and I would like to touch on those as well. First of all, parklets. This is a story that's unfolded over the last several years. It began in 2011. The creative names that are here lend itself to the vibrancy that we see on the street. Our very first parklet, and first of all, a parklet is really a play on words from the point of view of taking over parking spaces and turning them into people spaces. But the first one, aptly named Parallel Park, we removed 2 parallel parking spots and turned it into a lovely seating area in the area of Main and 14th in the Mount Pleasant area. We then expanded in 2012 to urban pasture and hot tubs in 2 other neighborhoods, the downtown and Sunset communities. This allowed us not only to engage the business community, but also as staff to learn several key items and initiatives for us to develop a pilot program or some guidelines for a pilot program. We then launched the pilot program in 2013. We had a guide for that, providing some framework for businesses in which they could then apply to expand these opportunities, whether it's sidewalk space or just opportunities to create a focal point within the neighborhood and the business area. One of the things that was key to this was balancing the needs of the various user groups for this public space, this amenity that we have, which is sidewalk. But recognizing that our sidewalks are getting busy, we needed some creative ways to provide for additional space to be able to further support businesses. And parklets themselves were one idea, and I'll touch on some others in a moment. Where we ended up, beyond that pilot program, we added 3 more. So we doubled the 3 that we had, from 3 to 6. Continuing to have lessons learned from this, we had opportunities to engage with businesses, BIAs. The designs themselves were coming forward, typically not from one group, but from a variety of stakeholders that came forward, where the business would partner with landscape architects or other design firms to lend that creativity to the streetscape itself. Despite the small numbers, we had many lessons learned, and the businesses themselves have been extremely supportive of this. To that end, we actually conducted a small survey, and this was based on passersby for all 6 parklets. And there's some key things here. I think the graph on the left is one of the key goals that we have within the city, is to make our walking experience and our sidewalks more vibrant and exciting. And that's really what we saw here. More than 90% of people actually felt that way. So even though they weren't using the parklet, the fact that it was there and it created that sort of vibrancy on the street, more than 90%. On the right, the 91%, again over 90%, for those that actually stopped to use it, again, they enjoyed the space. Now, below that, we engage businesses as well, because they're a critical supporter of this. They're a critical participant in it. Roughly 2/3 supported. We had a number at the time, a large number that were in the undecided category, but it was still very promising for us to see that 2/3 were supportive of this in general. Now, as we sort of broke this down further, and we wanted to do some behavioral mapping, like what are people using this for? Where are the benefits being seen? Well, socializing, eating, drinking, activity watching, using your technology. We all get trapped into catching up on an email or letting people know where we are and meet us at the parklet. That's probably what they were saying. But there's also some other activities, and including giving somebody a hug was noticed on that. So what we're happy to say is, from those lessons learned and several years of engaging with the different stakeholders, we're on the verge of launching a parklet program. With council support, we have a parklet manual that builds upon the pilot project, provides additional information to businesses to enable them to be able to apply for additional parklets. We're hoping that we actually have a number of applications in the works right now. They've applied. With this formalized program, we would be able to further launch those. And the timing of those really depends on the businesses themselves. We'll finish the review based on the outcome of today, give them the thumbs up, and whether they want to build it as fast as they can in the next month or two, or whether they want to time it for sometime later this year, that's really up to them. We don't dictate the timelines for when the businesses themselves want to coordinate those efforts. Moving on to patios, we have had continued growth. We saw a significant spike leading up to 2010. It sort of paused at 2010, but then we've continued to see additional growth with over 300 licensed patios and roughly the same number of small unlicensed patios. So the differences being, licensed patios typically have a railing surrounding them. That's required to dictate and better understand the number of seats, which builds upon some requirements from different approvals with liquor licensing and building bylaw code and washrooms and all sorts of things like that. But the smaller patios as well, where it might be a coffee shop or an ice cream store that just wants to provide additional seating and allow people to enjoy the ambiance on the street. We've engaged in new trials beyond just allowing more patios, and we've tried to streamline the process over the years, working with internal review groups to be able to pull many of those reviews, whether they're from a safety point of view or just the interactions of ensuring that user groups on a sidewalk, for visually impaired, for instance, or people with mobility needs, are not encumbered by this, and we can still provide that balance of the different user groups that are there. But we've had support from the province, for instance, on separated patios, which allows for liquor licensing to be not directly connected to the business itself. And there's an example of one that was built, very colorful. Unfortunately, the owner put that in for 1 year. And we've continued to explore these with not only the province, but other businesses. We know that there are opportunities and interest from many businesses for these. And the evolution of this is reflected in streeteries, which we'll also talk about in a minute. From the lessons learned of other initiatives that we've brought forward, extended patio hours in 2013, we launched that partway through the summer, extending the patio hours from 11 till 12. And then in 2014, we had a full season of having those extended hours till 12. And then beyond that, 1 a.m. last year, we've worked with the province as well to further streamline that in suggesting that there were opportunities to match the hours of the liquor licensing. And that prevents us from requiring additional public hearings for changing their liquor license. So it's really working with partners such as the province and or some of the other internal reviews for liquor licensing to match our existing processes and make that simpler. Where we are now is, you can see these numbers. We've had a growth in 2014 when we had a full season of the extended hours, and in 2015 the numbers dropped a little bit, but it was for later hours. We would suggest that the lessons learned from this, for instance, are that the businesses themselves, it needs to fit their business model. There are some limitations on it based on land use and adjacencies to other businesses. We've simplified the process as much as possible, and one of the key restrictions is really only did they have any complaints with regard to the operation of their patio in previous years or in the current year, and if so, then we scale it back to 11 again. Where there's another opportunity, and one thing that involves a number of different stakeholders, and it's something that's come up not only from the point of view of the businesses, but also with the BIAs from a streetscape point of view, but also from our internal review groups, whether that's planning or fire and rescue services. We want to make these patios, and the vibrancy that we see, we get many wonderful days to enjoy a patio throughout the entire year. Yet there are some seasons where it's a little drafty or a little cold or a little chilly. We want to be able to provide those opportunities to enhance patios, to provide additional weather protection throughout the year, but in a manner that's safe and also in a manner that still retains that vibrancy of the streetscape. So we don't want it to just become a hard wall and a privatized space. We're looking for that, as I refer to it, that European feel of that transition from the business, the internal business, to this edge treatment of a wonderful streetscape to where people would be walking by and enjoying the sidewalks themselves. The evolution of this and where we've taken this is this idea of streeteries, which is something that we've learned, which is taking the idea of a patio and the idea of a parklet and merging the two and allowing businesses to further use what is currently a parking space and designating it more for the business themselves. Right now, parklets are very public in nature. They're intended to be used by all. There is an interest, both within the business community and elsewhere, and we've seen this in other cities, to provide opportunities, whether it's year-round or maybe seasonally, to be able to expand this. This is something that we would like to embark on a trial with council's endorsement for the next few years. We say several years because there is some capital cost for the business to endeavor to put a structure like this in, and we want them the opportunity to see how it goes for a year or two if they're interested. So we're proposing a 3-year pilot program at this point. Finally, craft carts and vending opportunities that are beyond the sort of stationary parklets, patios, or sort of flower and produce displays that you might see elsewhere. We've been approached and have engaged with a number of groups, not the least of which is the Craft Council of BC, and there's also some groups in different neighborhoods, including the downtown east side, in which there's opportunities to explore vending, to formalize it in a more structured manner, and to support some different groups, particularly the craft and artist groups. We have one current art cart within the city, and we wanted to be able to provide something more than that. We have one in the Gastown area, and we wanted to be able to work with different crafters and artists to be able to expand those opportunities. The timing of which is suggested for spring of 2017, and that allows us to engage with those groups and identify any barriers and work through those. In summary, we've got these three proposals. One is the formalization of the Parklet program. The second being the continued expansion and creativity to be able to support businesses with patios, whether that's extended hours or being able to provide year-round weather protection and opportunities for those businesses. And then also from a craft cart point of view to enliven the streets with this idea of not just flowers and produce and perhaps food, but also with arts and crafts as well. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions from council.
Thank you very much, Mr. Edwards. You do have questions, with, starting with Councillor Deal.
Thank you very much. Some of my favorite topics. A couple of questions. In chronological order from the presentation, smoking on the parklets. What's the regulation on that?
So they're public space, so we actually suggest that they shouldn't be an opportunity to smoke on these.
Because otherwise we'll end up with what we have with patios, which is that.
That's right.
Yeah, right. Cool. The railing issue, is that a provincial regulation, or is it or do we have control over the extent to which we need railings? We need to have, we can't have free range wine.
Yes. So the liquor licensing laws that are provincial require that there be a boundary condition, whether that's a railing. So
a planter or something lower and a little bit less chill,
exactly.
Like could be.
So I've had those discussions. I've started those discussions with the province. They have, for some of these situations, been open to the idea of something, but there still needs to be a non-permeable barrier of some kind.
Right.
And I think that there's opportunities for us here as well.
Awesome, because I know that we have limited width, so wide planters might be a challenge, but I'll bet there's some really creative, artistic ways of delineating that without making it be necessarily a railing.
Absolutely.
I'd love to have that be part of this. The utility strip, are we still running into issues around how much we can expand into, and for those of you watching at home, that would be the part of the sidewalk where you have things like parking meters, newspaper boxes, et cetera.
So with that, there are some limitations just from the available space. One of the key considerations for us is the sidewalk area where we would expect the large volumes of pedestrians to move. Where there's larger volumes, there's limitations on how much we can actually restrict that. Thus, the exploration of streeteries, which would allow us to use not only that boulevard strip, but also explore the opportunities to take over some patio space. There is, however, some additional discussion that needs to happen with regard to the boundary condition in those cases. So,
right, because you might, yeah, because
we'll
you have
resolve
people
that.
adjacent to traffic.
Exactly.
Okay, since that was the natural segue, although let's not talk about segues, let's get to the streeteries. Fantastic. I think many of us here have seen them in Halifax, Ottawa, San Francisco. One of the conditions I've seen, which I didn't hear specifically referred to, perhaps I missed it and I didn't see in the report, was the idea of having the sidewalk actually go around the patio and have the patio occupy the sidewalk contiguous to the building.
So I too have seen that in a number of cities. At this point, we are discussing that with our transportation staff. There are some trade-offs with that, and I think one of the key considerations is for the mobility impaired or visually impaired we place a lot of weight on ensuring that there's a continuous walking surface. So that's one of the key considerations as to why we actually explored separated patios, is to ensure that idea of a continuous walking surface for the variety of many stakeholders that are there without enforcing them to go out of their way or closer to traffic, and to keep that comfort for them. It's something that we're willing to explore.
I want to explore that quite robustly, actually, because I've seen some examples. I'll give you an example I saw in Halifax. The streets and the sidewalks are quite cobblestoney. The sidewalk was occupied by a patio that was contiguous to a pub and fenced, and then there was a fenced walkway around it which was wooden but had a mat down over it and provided a very smooth transition that simply would be like a chicane in the sidewalk and well marked. I just think that's a fabulous option that we should be exploring absolutely and robustly, not just sort of maybe in the future.
Oh no, absolutely, we'll be.
I see Mr. Doberman has leapt to his feet.
Yeah, I think it's just, as Mr. Edwards mentioned, it's about trade-offs, but ideally, we're not making trade-offs. Ideally, if we have a continuous patio that comes across, then the sidewalk or pedestrian diversion, we just make that a little bit wider, we make it a little longer, we make it a little bit better, so that we have a walking route that meets all the needs as well. So we try not to make it a situation of trade-offs, but just have to accommodate all the different needs.
Good, so let's not make that one in the future, let's make that one that's
I
possible.
think you're going to hear from a business owner shortly.
In fact, I might even be aware of that. Thank you, and then finally, on the 3-year pilot, that seems like a long pilot. What happens if it's terribly and fabulously successful in the first year? Can we, like this first pilot on the Parklets has been longer than I think was necessary, just because we hadn't focused down on it perhaps. So I would love to make sure that as soon as this pilot starts, if it's successful, that we have the opportunity to expand immediately without waiting 3 years.
Would be happy to bring that back to council with updates.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Thanks. You also have questions from Councillor Carr.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks so much for the presentation. My first question is, what's the difference between a streetery and a patio?
Certainly. So the streeteries themselves is the expansion of a patio into the parking space. So at this point, all patios, the definition that we have, at least at this point, is that they're either an extension of the frontage or we have separated patios. What makes a streetery is to define it separately from parklets, for instance, where we're actually designating the space for businesses, but it really is an expanded patio. It's further expanding a patio to take over a portion of the street carriageway as well.
Okay, and the only limitations are whether or not engineering and it is satisfied that this is fine, right?
I think that there's engineering. There's also going to be liquor licensing in the province from a safety on the street. They've expressed some ideas on that in the past, but really it is the use of that space from engineering, and I think that there's lots of opportunities there.
Mm-hmm.
And adjacent businesses too. I mean, engineering is a can-do department, so I just don't want it to come across as that we're the yes or the no's. I mean, we meet with the adjacent businesses, and so if there's some general consensus with the immediate businesses there that's a better use of the space, then we're happy to look at that.
Thank you. And adjacent zoning, I imagine, is critical. Good. Thank you. That's good on that question. Although I am interested in the patios. The whole programs that you've outlined are great. Like Café Saint-Jacques, which people work. It's in a residential area. So are we looking at ways in which we might be able to move into residential areas if the zoning and business licensing is appropriate?
If it's appropriate, absolutely. And we've got many examples of where we have patios where there's mixed land use and residential close by. It may mean that there's opportunities throughout the day or throughout different seasons, but there may be some limitations on how late they can stay open.
Yeah.
But that might be the only limitation that there is. So we are exploring those as well.
Great, thanks. That's good. And I did note the smoking, the 2.6 that used the parklet smoking. So I'm glad that Councillor Deal already asked that question. In terms of patios and extended hours, you did note, well, there was a drop from 2014 to 2015 in terms of applications. And at the same time, you mentioned that if there were some issues around hours, that was brought to the attention. Now, I'm not sure, it wasn't in the report how many patios were either closed or hours cut back due to complaints.
Yes. So that's actually in within the presentation. So the numbers that were denied, and I believe there were only 2 at most each year. So where there were complaints, they lose the opportunity to extend the hours for that expanded time, as well as for the subsequent year. So they're it's in the business's self-interest to self-police. Right. So the first thing we do is warn them that there's been a concern. If there's a subsequent complaint, then we actually work to ask them to restrict their hours back to their regular hours.
Okay, so that's 2 out of 100 in the previous year too. Okay. And final question around patios again. Heaters, outdoor patio heaters. I've received a number of complaints around people concerned about those heaters and climate change. And we are going to, become a 100% renewable energy city. So one hopes that before 2050, long before that, there's some solution. Are we talking at all with the business community in terms of that concern?
We absolutely are. The idea of heaters and how to make these year-round from a weather comfort point of view, I think there's the sustainability side. There's some safety concerns that arise too if they're enclosed while there's heaters in those areas. So there are a number of ideas like that that all link quite closely together, and I think that will be part of the report back as well.
Great, thank you.
One more counselor with questions now. Counselor DeGenova.
I just have one question regarding accessibility. Some of the pictures during the presentation and in the report, it's not clear. Are these patios or some of them accessible? Councillor Affleck and I sit as the liaison to the Persons with Disabilities Advisory Committee here at the city, and it's important for me to know. Just recently at their last meeting, they were asking about accessibility and how it's been incorporated into our projects. So when I read reports like this, I'd like to ask about that, as some of the pictures showed that they're enclosed areas, obviously. So are there any provisions for accessibility?
There are actually, and it's a requirement for all of them. So within the parklets themselves, we make that condition where it meets the sidewalk as flush as possible. So there may be a small bump, but in those cases, we do make them all accessible. Some of the seats may have some tight corners in them, but the parklets themselves all are. And as a requirement for patios, they're also required to be accessible.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that is it for questions from council for now. So we're going to move on to speakers. And our first speaker is Miss Onette O'Shea, who's here on behalf of the Yaletown Business Improvement Association. Miss O'Shea, I know you know this, but for the benefit of all the speakers that are here today, I'll just quickly run through a much shorter list of rules for you, which is that you have 5 minutes total, and you are welcome to use all or part of that. Council may have questions for you after you speak, so if you can just hold a minute at the podium, and I'll let you know if there are questions or not. So welcome.
Great. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good morning, Council. I'm very, very pleased to be here to talk about something that is of huge impact in the neighborhood that I serve, which is Yaletown. In the last 7 years, we've gone from 40 restaurants to 86. More than half of them have patios, so patios in Yaletown are synonymous. Generally and overall, support the recommendations before you today, support the work that Scott Edwards and Cheryl Nelms have done with their team. I think it's great work. A few comments and a few cautions, please. The shared time proposal where parklets or streeteries could sometimes be for exclusive use and sometimes be for public use, we very much support, because we notice that there is a lack of seating, of public seating that you don't have to pay for. Throughout Yaletown and in other neighborhoods in the city, and it's extremely expensive for a BIA to put a bench in, extremely expensive, between $7,000 and $8,000 per bench. So since our council and our entire city is supporting multimodal transportation, where people are going to take the bus and then they're going to walk for a while and then maybe they're going to jump on a bike, they're going to need to sit. They're going to need to rest. So we need to have some seating that's available without them having to pay for it. So that's a caution. We fully support the idea of sometimes the streeteries are exclusive use and sometimes they're for free seating. That also means you'll have to do some work on enforcement of the use of the patio if it's the free seating time. Design extension, something near and dear to my heart. The current parklets look like they've been dropped from outer space. They just kind of quite literally, bam, appear on a street, and they're boundaried and they're really safe and there's speed bumps, and good Lord, they're ugly. Strongly encourage some design implements be brought in. Glad to see people from the arts community sitting behind me. We'd like to see painted sidewalks. We'd like to see the approach to the streeteries or the parklets designed, not just the parklet dropped out of outer space into a spot. Let's soften the approach and open the approach so that you know you're arriving somewhere special instead of happening upon it as a odd use of a parking spot. I'd like to see more incorporation into an actual piece of public realm instead of a piece of a puzzle. So, and I know that city has lots of public art that's in unused, sitting in warehouses in places, and you have an engineering department that can do darn near anything. So we'd like to see the extension of the specialized approach to the parklet. The parklet can stay parking spot sized, but let's make sure that people walking know that they're approaching something special. I'd love to see in some of the parklet designs some of the past items from Robson Redux. So many beautiful uses of special design elements used in Robson, and then they just go away. If those were offered to the business community, we'd have a lot more parklets a lot faster, because the design has already been done, the work's already been done, they just need to be transported. On patios, I'm echoing Councillor Deal's request. The borders, I understand the liquor control, but they do look like jails, and they do look like you're being naughty if you're on the wrong side of it. Is there a way that the boundaries of the parklets and patios can be softened? Calgary, Halifax, New York, they use things, they allow, a cafe to use wheelbarrows and planters and trees and movable, softer boundaries, so that it's not quite so this is a box and we're just putting it here. That's not what public realm is. We don't let anything else get designed like a big box. Why are we doing this? Why are we incorporating this into public realm? So soften the boundaries. From my members in Yaletown, we need to increase the clarity or improve the clarity on when they're allowed to have the side walls and the front walls on the patios. I know that it's clear, but it's not. It may be clear to those who work inside these hallowed walls. It's not clear outside them. The business community is going to push the boundaries, and unless it's very clear on when the sidewalls can be down and when they can't, then you're going to end up with outdoor rooms, outdoor boxes, and it can look like a Canadian Tire catalog. So some clarity and some communications around that, possibly even a workshop that can be done on how to develop and design a patio that will improve public realm and improve the neighborhood could be offered. We'd certainly be interested in partnering with that. Some questions on noise emanating from a patio. Acoustic okay or not? Still not clear. Read the bylaws this morning, still not clear. Can they have a guitar player in the corner if they're not plugged in? Yes or no? It's unclear. If the music is emanating from the restaurant but not actually from the patio, but it's loud because the restaurant is loud, what are the rules on that one? That I'm getting asked lots and lots of questions on a daily basis in Yaletown.
Ms. O'Shea, I'm sorry, but you are at
sorry.
time. Although it sounds like you may have had more questions, which I suspect someone may want to elicit from you in questions.
I can wrap it up, Councillor.
Okay. So we've got Councillor Meigs with questions, and then Councillor Deal.
Thanks for coming. And I guess Yaletown was really a leader in terms of animating sidewalks and stuff, because you had those old warehouse ramps and all that kind of stuff. But the recent decision to shift the farmers market confused me a bit. Is there a view in your BIA that sidewalks okay, but cars have to have access? Or to me, the farmers market was a great asset, and I was there at the opening last year. What's the philosophy of the BIA with regard to that? Does there have to be car access, or maybe I'm reading too much into it? Sympathetic to these sidewalk improvements, but maybe not to road closure. I'm just curious.
Supportive of both and all. The position of the Yaletown Business Improvement Association, the Board of Directors, and our membership is that we fully and absolutely support the farmers market, and we're in a lawsuit because of our support of the farmers market. So we're willing to go to the mat for the improvement of a neighborhood and for the community leadership that entails.
Okay, I didn't realize there was live litigation, so I guess that'll be the end of this line of questioning. But well, that's interesting. I'm glad to hear that, because I did think it was one of the tremendous assets of
truly is
business district. And I think that some of your comments about softening edges and so on go to that whole point about integrating these things in an easy way so that they can be set up and taken down quickly and that kind of thing. Okay,
it's a great street use.
That's all I had. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Meigs. Councillor Deal.
Thank you very much. Yes, just don't mention the farmers market. You have, as always, a list of really interesting ideas, and I almost never do this, but was there another great idea that you were about to spring forth with?
Just one. We're going to get asked this, so it's a food for thought. Access to power
Right.
for the parklets and/or the streeteries.
Okay.
It gets dark.
Right.
What kind of lighting? They're not allowed to have candles.
Right. Oh, right. No candles?
No.
All right. All right. Thank you for that. So a couple of things I just wanted to ask you about. You mentioned the design aspect. I'll check in with staff on how they're currently designed, but there's one like called, there's a picnic table one out, or a hot tub one out on Fraser Street that's absolutely fabulous, right? So, so that option is there, and so we'll all explore with staff how we currently choose design. But are you thinking things like Picnerbia, my very favorite Robson Square installation, or?
Yes.
Hard to do that one accessibly, but it's...
But I'd like to see not only the parklet or streetery, the hardscape part of it, to have a little bit more openness, but also the approach to it. We can be painting the sidewalk or special pavement treatments around it so that it's not a standalone box on the street, that it's got an approach.
It's like a destination public space.
Yes.
Okay, that's a really interesting idea. It's like wayfinding to a public seat.
Yes.
That's really interesting. Okay, thank you for that. On the music side, I've always been interested in exploring that. It seems to be a very touchy subject. It seems to be one of the ways we can get our patios open later and expand it is to continue to say no music. Do you feel that the residents around you would be okay with acoustic music on the patio?
I think that the residents would support acoustic. I think
like up until a certain time.
Up until a certain time. I think weirdly enough, it would have to be defined very clearly what exactly is acoustic, and we would have to have some consideration about we don't want patio wars.
Yeah.
They are side by each.
Yeah, they're very close.
You can end up with them each trying to be louder than the next.
Yeah, no, that's and that would be residencies and that kind of noise pollution, we'll call it noise mayhem, would be a challenge. But I think that's worth asking about. Thank you. And I guess my last question, alternatives to the plastic sheeting that's put on the sides. I mean, what came to mind for me was my older sister's beaded curtain to her closet, right? I mean, it's a very 70s, possibly 60s reference. Did you, what kind of ideas, you sort of explored a little bit of what you thought might be alternatives, but it's hard for me to imagine what would provide both transparency with regards to light, coming through with the desired outcome of having wind protection.
The side walls on the patios are, the side and front wall, the boxing of the patios, I understand why it's important in the wintertime, because in the wintertime we do get sideways rain. And we're trying to provide an opportunity for people to enjoy some outdoor activity without having to be in Gore-Tex and a parka. Mm-hmm. There aren't a lot of alternatives to the sidewalls on the plastic. I think it's really important that the walls, that the clarity around when do the walls need to come up and be removed, what is that actual start date and end date, and what does remove mean? Because they should be completely disappeared. The other wall sides that I've seen that allow for the delineation of the patio, but not necessarily the weather protection, are tall growing plants and grasses. We actually provide a landscape team to our restaurants to advise them on the types of grasses and bamboos that will grow 4 or 5 feet high from a 2-foot high planter. So they can create that wall without having to create a jail.
Yeah, ornamental grasses are great for that.
Yeah.
Okay, and on the lighting side, my personal balcony is covered in solar lights. I don't know if you'd looked at solar light options. Are those currently?
Tough with the shadow fall in downtown Vancouver. Yeah, you've got 40-story buildings that mean, we tried solar lighting in a few of our places in Yaletown, and we were just getting little slivers of light on it.
Okay.
So it just didn't get the power.
Great info. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. That's it for questions. Okay, next up we have Stephen Regan, who's here from the West End Business Improvement Association.
Good morning, Madam Chair and councillors. I'm Stephen Regan on behalf of the West End Business Improvement Association. We probably have over 120 or 30 restaurants and food and liquor primary stores. So we're very interested in this policy. We congratulate staff on getting the report to council. We appreciate it. We know it was a long time coming with the pilots. Here to speak broadly in favor of the recommendations, specifically commercial patios, the extended hours, that's something that, the clarity and the predictability and the opportunity to do that is very important to business. Also enhanced weather protection, maybe a little bit aligned with Yaletown on sort of the design and the boxing, but certainly want to create an enabling business environment and not overly constrict what they can do and allow them to, be able to host customers comfortably in all seasons. And most importantly, I think the streetery is something we've landed on as an interesting possibility. Very much support the pilot process, being able to, go beyond, as Jerry said, a can-do department. Let's try some different things. We've seen in other jurisdictions, and we've submitted a report to city staff. I'm not sure if council has seen it, but I'm happy to share that. We did a high-level overview of Davie Village as it went through the West End plan. Subsequent to the West End plan, we went in and did a fairly detailed, look at what commercial patios could look like on sidewalks and on the curbs. And when you get down to it, there are capacity issues. There's a lot of kind of the devil's in the details. We think Davie Village, because of the change of land use through the West End plan, is a prime candidate for a patio zone, something where you might explore a clustering. So not just one off on a street, and it's nice if you happen to bump by it, but actually a destination where there might be 4, 5, or 6 patios over a couple of 3 blocks, interspersed with strategically located parklets. And we know that's a lot of work to do. That's a lot of impact. Related to that, in the policy, I'm not sure if I heard it. I came in a little bit late after your presentation, Scott. Parking is still a key consideration in commercial areas. The commercial lanes we've been advocating ever since the West End plan process was going through in the consultation. Are we taking maximum advantage of the commercial lanes that parallel these commercial streets for offsetting some of that loss of parking, even on a not a one-to-one basis, but some sort of offset, so that, as a destination, we want to encourage lots of walking, but we know that people are still taking, other modes of transportation, including vehicles or car share and so forth. Want to echo not only what Councillor Deal said about the wraparound sidewalk. We think that's an interesting opportunity. Businesses, it's easier for them, on a liquor licensing and control, staff, impact for the public when you have servers crossing the sidewalk. We think it's doable. Montreal does it successfully on many streets. Having said that, businesses, it would be interesting to have some flexibility. And as Jerry had said, it's a really interesting opportunity. I think if you had the wraparound sidewalks, they were designed at a high level. Calgary and the Kensington area does it. Edmonton and White Avenue, even Penticton in Main Street is way ahead of this, and they've created those wraparounds that seem to work. They seem to be relatively easy to navigate. Design, certainly we want to make sure the designs are there. It's a similar observation to a net where you kind of bump into some of these parklets and you go, oh, how does that fit into the character? What are the things that go into it? Obviously, safety, accessibility, all of those pieces need to get worked into it. But certainly, I think from a design perspective, it would be interesting at a certain guideline level to make sure that there was an aesthetic to these streeteries, to the wraparound sidewalks that complemented where the city is going in terms of its public realm, quality public realm. Yeah, I think that kind of wraps it up. I'll cut myself off a little early because Annette took my 40-second. I'm just kidding.
That is a lovely example of self-regulation. Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Deal has questions for you. 1 second.
Just a brief follow-up. This program has been done in conjunction with businesses and BIA, so assumedly you would be at the table helping to decide on expansion within your BIA.
Yeah, very much. We'd like to be part of that.
And I would love it. I think you sent me a copy of that study 2 years ago, but if you could resend it, that would be
I'll send you a copy.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Great. You also now have questions from Councillor Carr.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Mr. Regan, for your work and being here. So a question to you. I did ask staff this question. As we move forward to becoming the 100% renewable energy city, are organizations like yours, the Western BIA, looking into technologies for heating, lighting, outdoor patios, increase the comfort level, but decrease the greenhouse gas emissions?
We haven't, in the sphere of policy that we've gotten into and where we have some expertise, it's been a little bit beyond where we as a BIA have been able to really get in and do credible research and understand the issues. Having said that, we support a number of businesses to come to mind. They happen to be accommodation properties, the Listel, very much positioning itself as a sustainable, environmentally aware and conscious and practicing organization. Also Times Square Suites in the corner of Davie and Denman, they would have gone solar power to tree lighting had there been, enough light in the area, the power. You've got batteries that then take up space and maintenance. So, I think a number of businesses are interested in pushing the envelope, and being on the cutting edge of some of this technology sometimes might be cost prohibitive and you might not get the bang for the buck yet. But if there was a partnership, if there was a way to work with the city or procure with the city, I think there would be lots of interest in exploring that. And I can say I know my board, every time there's an opportunity, for example, you're going to do the recycling pilot program on Denman Street at the end of the summer. So we've said, our businesses have said, yes, we want to be part of that. We know there's going to be, some bumps along the way and some things won't work well, and we'll learn by doing. But my board was very clear that we want to be part of where the city is going on recycling, on greening the city. Just sometimes taking the cutting edge of investing in technology is tricky, especially in the public realm.
Right, great. Good suggestions. Thank you.
Great. That is it for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Last speaker I have registered is Alana McIntyre from the Pint Public House. Welcome, Ms. McIntyre.
Hi there. My name is Alana, and I speak on behalf of the ownership group at the Pint Public House under the Abbott and Pender Hospitality Group. I'm here today to support the proposal of the Parklet pilot program. I've lived and worked in the Victory Square Park area of downtown for the last 6 years and have noticed and felt the effects from the lack of patios in this neighborhood. We feel that parklets and other creative patios are a great way to encourage community engagement as well as enhance local business offerings. We fully support the Parklet initiative and feel that by creating a more dynamic patio culture in the downtown area, it would be beneficial to both the community and local businesses. In addition to, we would like the opportunity to discuss alternative patio options such as sidewalk patios, which Heather Deal mentioned, sidewalk patios going around the extended parking spaces, which have been successful in other cities. I brought with me examples of successful sidewalk patios. You should have all received them in your emails from Kelowna, Edmonton, and Halifax. Also included is an example of a potential sidewalk patio at our location through a rendering. We consider the addition of sidewalk patios to be similarly beneficial to the neighborhood. We have had numerous meetings with the local business associations, Hastings Crossing, unfortunately Landon couldn't be here today, who agree with us and are in full support of such a project. Their letter of support is also included in that email. I had a question regarding liquor licensing for parklets, which Scott answered, so that's good to know. From my experience within the industry, I anticipate some complications around the serving of food and liquor across the sidewalk. That's why we've brought up the alternative option of a sidewalk patio with a sidewalk being extended to a parking space and around the patio. So perhaps instead of a licensed or non-licensed parklet, a licensed patio would be more realistic operationally while still enhancing the community engagement. That's all I have. Thank you for listening, and thanks for your consideration.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Councillor Deal did have questions. Yep. One sec.
Follow question. I'm looking at your photographs. Yeah. I certainly recognize the Halifax one is one I've taken photographs of myself. So again, for you as a business, your service, I mean, we were really happy a couple of years ago when the province said it was okay to have servers cross a sidewalk with a beer on a tray, to get to that outer area. But for your business itself, you feel that the balance is appropriate for the public realm and the best use of your server's time as well as your customer's experience to have that contiguous and have the sidewalk wind around?
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. And it's just a safety thing, not bumping into pedestrians, or if something gets broken on the sidewalk. It's just overall it's a bit better if it's a bit contained.
A little bit.
Restaurant, exactly.
Because you've got quite a narrow sidewalk there.
Very, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of loss of that parking place in front, is that something that you feel would have an impact on your business?
It's a commercial loading zone right now, so we've taken that into consideration. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's something that the staff will have to look at is
Absolutely.
maybe moving the commercial zone, because assumedly you use that zone for your own business.
We do, but then we also have an alley in the back, which we've used as commercial as well. So they're kind of both. We have two technically.
Just want to flag that for staff, that that's the kind of thing, the moving of the zones if necessary.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that was all I needed from you. Thank you very much. I do have questions to staff. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, we have questions now from Councillor Carr too. One
It's
sec.
okay, Madam Chair. I just couldn't find your email to begin with.
Oh, okay.
I actually found it. It's
Oh,
okay.
you did?
It just
Great.
came
Okay,
from
awesome.
correspondence group.
That's great.
So great. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's it for registered speakers. So we are on to questions to staff. Sorry, Councillor Deal, I don't know where you went. I didn't, which is the weird thing. Okay, so we're good to go. I will start your timer. Questions to staff.
Thank you very much. Thank you to staff. I think you heard most of the questions. I'll read them out and then we can get some answers. Lighting options, music, painted sidewalks alerting people to public seating, design, and then I'll ask another follow-up question around the craft carts at the end. Fire away.
Power opportunities as well for different on-street activations, whether that's actual Viva installations or some of our food carts. So that would be something that we'd be happy to look at. I think the idea of power in general.
And if we could look at the candle thing, because you can have candles inside a restaurant.
No, that's...
Let's check that.
I'll look into that as well. The idea of music, what we typically hear about is the idea of a speaker that's just inside the door and facing out towards the public realm. So that's something that I'll look at as well. That idea is, to me, quite different than the idea of an acoustic player that's there.
And I love the idea of acoustics, so if we can look into that.
Yes, absolutely. Painted sidewalks and activating the space and the design, I'm going to deal with those all in the same one. The designs themselves and how we deal with that treatment, for the most part, the design is coming from the applicant. They're engaging the design community and bringing forward some very creative, whether it's hot tubs or something else. There has been an evolution in the few parklets that we've done, from parallel park, in which we've got many more bollards and sort of paint road markings around the edge of it, to some of our more recent ones that don't have that sort of safety shroud around them, and it's more of a welcoming environment. I believe that there's still more that we can do. So that's something that will encourage the applicant and or internal stakeholders to see what we can do more. I think there's lots of opportunity there.
Okay, cool. In fact, one of the very first ones I saw was a long time before this program existed, was downtown. It was an intervention, and it was AstroTurf and a potted palm and a couple of beach chairs, and it was occupied instantly.